People dressed like you don't move millions, Rebecca Collins said with a polished smile that never reached her eyes, and the quiet lobby of Harbor National Bank suddenly felt smaller than its marble walls, every polished floor tile reflecting the moment like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. Marcus Ellington paused only long enough to glance at the silver clock above the reception desk before taking another calm step forward, his faded denim jacket hanging loosely over a plain gray shirt that had clearly seen better days, and work boots with worn leather that looked more familiar with construction sites than private banking lounges. No expensive watch sparkled beneath the lights, no designer logo announced wealth, and no assistant carried a leather briefcase behind him. He looked like a man who had spent years working with his hands instead of building companies with boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. Rebecca noticed every detail and quietly decided she already knew his story. She folded her hands on the polished counter and offered the kind of smile reserved for people she believed did not belong. Around them, customers checked investment portfolios on tablets, business owners discussed wire transfers over coffee, and a retired couple waited patiently near the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. The atmosphere had been peaceful only seconds before, but now conversation slowed as curious eyes drifted toward the man in old clothes standing beneath a crystal chandelier. Marcus looked at Rebecca with a calm expression that revealed nothing. "I'd like to speak with someone about a large transfer," he said in an even voice. Rebecca laughed softly, careful enough to sound polite, but loud enough for nearby clients to hear. "Our premium advisors are very busy today, sir. Maybe start with the standard service desk." A young teller named Olivia glanced at the computer screen beside her and then looked back at Marcus, her eyebrows lifting for the briefest moment before she quickly lowered her eyes. Rebecca noticed the reaction and stepped closer to block the monitor without turning around. "Please have a seat if you're opening your first account," she continued, pointing toward a row of chairs near the entrance instead of the private offices. Marcus remained perfectly still. The silence stretched across the lobby like a slow-moving shadow until a businessman folded his newspaper and quietly watched, sensing that something about the exchange felt wrong. Rebecca maintained her confident smile, believing she controlled the room, unaware that every word was becoming part of a test she had never agreed to take. Marcus simply nodded once, slipped his hands into the pockets of his worn jacket, and looked at the elegant banking hall with the relaxed patience of someone who had waited much longer for things that truly mattered. Somewhere beyond the glass offices, a digital notification appeared on an executive dashboard, unnoticed by everyone except the system that had just recognized the name Marcus Ellington. Marcus Ellington accepted the chair nearest the entrance without the slightest hint of frustration and rested his weathered jacket across his knees as if he had nowhere else to be that afternoon. Rebecca Collins watched him from the premium service counter with quiet satisfaction, convinced that the situation had already solved itself. In her mind, people who belonged in executive offices never waited patiently and certainly never arrived wearing boots with fading leather and denim that looked older than some of the interns. Olivia tried to focus on balancing deposits, but the customer profile that had flashed across her screen refused to leave her thoughts. She had only seen it for 2 seconds before Rebecca blocked the monitor, yet those 2 seconds were enough to reveal an executive clearance level she had never encountered during 3 years at Harbor National Bank. Olivia slowly walked toward Rebecca and lowered her voice. "I think I should verify his request." Rebecca never looked away from Marcus. "There is nothing to verify. He is fishing for attention." At that exact moment, a well-dressed white businessman entered through the revolving doors carrying nothing but a smartphone and a cup of coffee. Rebecca immediately stepped around the counter with a warm smile that seemed completely different from the one she had offered Marcus. "Welcome back, Mr. Lawson. Your advisor is ready for you." The businessman nodded and disappeared behind the frosted glass offices within seconds. Several customers noticed the contrast, but returned to their own conversations without saying anything. Marcus quietly observed the exchange with calm eyes that reflected neither anger nor surprise. He reached into his pocket, removed a folded piece of paper, and studied a list written in neat handwriting. Customer greeting, response time, verification procedure, equal treatment. He checked a small box beside the first item with a blue pen before folding the page again. Olivia noticed the movement and curiosity replaced uncertainty. Across the lobby, an elderly woman whispered to her husband, "He looks like he is evaluating the place instead of waiting." The husband smiled softly. "Maybe appearances fool us more than we realize." Rebecca overheard the comment and dismissed it with a confident laugh. She walked back toward Marcus carrying a standard account brochure instead of the private banking portfolio he had requested. "If you are interested in building credit, this is a good place to start," she said pleasantly. Marcus accepted the brochure without complaint, glanced at the cover, and placed it beside him. Then he looked at the large wall clock again. Exactly 4 minutes had passed since he entered the building. Somewhere beyond the executive offices, another silent notification reached the regional network, automatically marking the branch as participating in an active service quality review. No alarms sounded, no manager received a warning, and no employee realized that every decision made from that moment forward would become part of a permanent record that could not be edited, explained away, or forgotten. The polished rhythm of Harbor National Bank continued as if nothing unusual had happened, but the air carried a quiet tension that settled over the marble lobby like a gathering storm. Marcus Ellington remained seated with relaxed shoulders while Rebecca Collins exchanged cheerful greetings with every customer who matched her idea of success. A young couple wearing business suits received bottled water before they even reached the counter. A man in an expensive navy blazer was escorted directly into a private office without presenting identification. Marcus watched every detail with patient eyes, never interrupting, never complaining, simply observing. After another minute, he stood and approached the counter once more. "I would like to arrange a wire transfer for $25 million, he said calmly. Rebecca tilted her head and smiled as though she had heard a child describe an impossible dream. "Transfers of that size require verified clients," she replied. "Perhaps you meant 25,000. Marcus answered with the same measured voice. "I said 25 million. Several nearby customers looked up from their phones. Rebecca folded her arms. "Then I will need multiple forms of identification, proof of funds, and documentation explaining the purpose of the transfer." Marcus reached into his pocket and placed a simple identification card on the counter. She glanced at it for less than a second before sliding it back without entering anything into the system. "That will not be enough." Olivia quietly stepped closer. "Company policy says we should verify the client profile before making a decision." Rebecca turned toward her with a polite smile that carried no warmth. "Thank you, Olivia. I have handled premium banking for 15 years. I know the policy." The younger employee nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the monitor, remembering the executive clearance she had seen only minutes earlier. An elderly veteran wearing a Harbor National baseball cap had been filling out paperwork near the window. He looked toward Marcus and then toward Rebecca. "Seems like the gentleman is just asking for a service," he said softly. Rebecca answered without looking at him. "We have procedures for unusual requests." Marcus rested one hand on the polished counter. "Please verify my name." Rebecca gave a small laugh. "Verification is reserved for established clients." At that exact moment, another customer in a tailored charcoal suit walked in and announced that he needed a $5 million transfer before lunch. Rebecca welcomed him immediately and instructed another associate to prepare a conference room without requesting a single document. The contrast did not go unnoticed. Whispered conversations spread across the lobby. Olivia lowered her voice until only Marcus could hear. "Sir, something about this does not feel right." Marcus met her eyes and offered the faintest smile. Sometimes the truth needs enough time to introduce itself. He stepped back from the counter and looked once more at the large clock above the entrance. 7 minutes had passed since he walked through the revolving doors, and somewhere inside the bank network another silent notification recorded every ignored policy, every unequal decision, and every confident smile that still believed nobody important was watching. Olivia could no longer ignore the uneasy feeling growing behind the teller station as she quietly signed into a secondary terminal that Rebecca rarely used, her fingers moving carefully across the keyboard until the client search page appeared once again. She entered the name Marcus Ellington, and the screen immediately shifted from blue to black before displaying a gold executive banner that she had never seen during her entire career at Harbor National Bank. Her breathing slowed. Across the top of the profile were 3 words that made her stare twice: board-level access. Before she could read another line, Rebecca stepped beside her and reached for the mouse. "Close it," she said in a low voice. Olivia looked up. "His profile is real," Rebecca answered with complete confidence. "Systems make mistakes. People like him create confusion all the time." Marcus remained near the counter, studying the framed photographs of community events hanging along the wall as though they interested him more than the conversation unfolding a few feet away. His calm presence somehow made the lobby even quieter. A woman in her early 30s wearing a navy business dress had been reviewing mortgage documents nearby. Her name was Jennifer Brooks, a corporate attorney on her lunch break, and she had watched every exchange since Marcus first walked inside. She finally closed her folder and stepped toward the counter. "Excuse me," she said. "The gentleman has asked for the same verification every other client receives." "Why is that a problem?" Rebecca answered with a practiced smile. "We are simply following internal procedures." Jennifer glanced toward Marcus and then back to Rebecca. "Procedures should look the same for everyone." An elderly veteran sitting near the window nodded quietly. "She is right." Another customer looked away from his laptop and listened. The room was slowly becoming a collection of witnesses instead of strangers. Olivia gathered enough courage to speak again. "His account has executive clearance and special handling instructions." Rebecca shook her head. "You are new enough to misunderstand what you are reading." Olivia knew she was not new, and she knew exactly what she had seen. Marcus turned from the photographs and walked back toward the counter with the same unhurried pace that had unsettled Rebecca from the beginning. "Has my name been verified?" he asked. Rebecca folded her hands together. "There is nothing further to discuss until we determine whether your request is legitimate." Jennifer frowned. "He asked for verification, not permission." The words hung in the polished lobby like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Marcus looked at Olivia for a brief moment, noticing the uncertainty in her expression, and gave a small reassuring nod that seemed to remove the weight from her shoulders. She opened the profile one final time and quietly memorized the executive reference number before Rebecca forced the screen dark again. Above them, the crystal lights reflected across the marble floor while unseen activity continued inside the bank network. Another automated record appeared, noting that an employee had attempted to confirm a protected client profile and that the attempt had been deliberately interrupted. The lobby still looked peaceful to anyone walking through the revolving doors, yet every quiet decision was slowly reshaping a story that none of them would be able to rewrite. Rebecca Collins straightened a stack of premium banking folders, as though perfect alignment could restore the confidence that had begun slipping through her fingers. But the whispers moving across the lobby were becoming impossible to ignore. Customers who had arrived for ordinary transactions now watched Marcus Ellington with quiet curiosity instead of dismissal, and that subtle change unsettled her more than any argument could have. She stepped away from the counter and signaled for Daniel Foster, the senior lobby associate, a middle-aged employee known for enforcing procedures with absolute certainty. Daniel approached Marcus with a professional smile that carried a noticeable distance. "Sir, perhaps we can assist you at another branch that is better equipped for your request." Marcus looked at him for a moment before answering. "Is this branch unable to verify a client name?" Daniel hesitated. Rebecca answered instead. "We simply believe another location would be more appropriate." Jennifer Brooks slowly closed her briefcase. "Appropriate based on what?" No one answered her. The silence settled over polished marble and polished reputations alike. Marcus lowered his eyes briefly, and for the first time since entering the bank, an old memory quietly surfaced. He remembered standing beside his father outside a neighborhood bank in Detroit more than 30 years earlier, wearing a pressed shirt his mother had carefully ironed for the occasion. His father had saved every extra dollar from 2 jobs to open a business account, only to be told they should return another day because the manager was suddenly unavailable. Minutes later, another family walked in and received immediate service with warm smiles and fresh coffee. Young Marcus had asked why they were leaving so quickly, and his father simply replied, "Never let another person's opinion decide your worth." That sentence had followed him through every late night, every failed investment, every impossible negotiation, until the boy who had once waited outside a bank built companies large enough to reshape city skylines. The memory faded as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same calm expression that had never left his face. Olivia watched him and understood that his patience did not come from weakness but from experience. Rebecca mistook that patience for surrender. "If there is nothing else, sir, we need to assist our scheduled clients." Marcus slowly removed his folded checklist once again and placed another small blue mark beside a line that no one else could read. Jennifer noticed the action and quietly smiled, realizing that the man in worn clothing looked less like a rejected customer and more like someone gathering evidence. The elderly veteran stood and walked closer, resting both hands on his cane. "Young man," he said softly, "you have handled this with more grace than most people ever could." Marcus nodded with genuine appreciation. Some lessons take a lifetime to practice. Above the reception area, the elegant clock advanced another minute, and deep inside Harbor National's secure network, an automatic countdown quietly reached its next stage. A confidential review team had now connected to the branch in real time, invisible to every employee in the lobby, while Rebecca Collins continued wearing the same confident smile, completely unaware that every decision she believed she controlled was slowly becoming a permanent part of a much larger judgment. Marcus Ellington unfolded his phone with the same quiet precision he had used to mark every item on his handwritten checklist, and the movement was so ordinary that nobody in the lobby paid much attention except Olivia, whose curiosity had already replaced uncertainty. Rebecca Collins watched from behind the counter with renewed confidence, convinced that the man in worn clothing was finally preparing to leave after realizing he could not force his way into private banking services. Instead, Marcus touched the screen once and lifted the phone to his ear. "Good afternoon, Evelyn. Please activate Protocol Black for Harbor National Branch 17. His voice never rose above conversation level. There was no anger, no frustration, only calm certainty. A composed voice answered immediately. "Confirmed. Live review is now active. Executive audit team connected. Regional oversight notified. Estimated arrival 4 minutes." Marcus simply replied, "Thank you," and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Rebecca smiled as if she had witnessed an empty performance. Calling imaginary executives will not change bank policy. Marcus looked toward the crystal lights hanging above the lobby. "No, policy changes people when people forget policy." Jennifer Brooks heard every word and slowly leaned against the marble counter, her expression thoughtful instead of amused. The elderly veteran adjusted his cap and whispered, "That sounded like someone giving orders, not making requests." Olivia returned to her terminal and noticed something unusual. The internal messaging system had begun refreshing every few seconds without explanation. A small icon she had never seen before appeared in the upper corner of the screen, displaying the words "Executive Session Active." Before she could mention it, Rebecca closed another premium appointment and greeted a wealthy investor with effortless warmth. Fresh coffee appeared almost instantly for the new arrival, while Marcus remained standing without so much as an offer of water. The contrast had become impossible to ignore. A college student waiting to open his first checking account quietly lowered his headphones and watched the scene unfold. A mother helping her teenage daughter deposit birthday money glanced between Marcus and Rebecca with growing discomfort. The polished lobby no longer felt relaxed. It felt like a theater moments before the curtain rose. Marcus checked the wall clock again. 10 minutes since his arrival. 10 minutes of assumptions carefully recorded without raising his voice once. Olivia looked back at the executive icon and noticed another update. Audit participants connected, Compliance Division, Client Experience Division, Regional Leadership. Her heartbeat quickened. Rebecca noticed Olivia staring at the monitor and laughed softly. "Do not let technical glitches distract you." Olivia answered without taking her eyes off the screen. "I do not think this is a glitch." Jennifer looked toward Marcus and for the first time saw something beyond the worn jacket and faded boots. She saw absolute confidence, the kind carried by people who already know the outcome before anyone else realizes a decision is being made. Marcus remained perfectly still, hands resting comfortably at his sides, while unseen systems awakened beyond the walls of Harbor National. The lobby remained silent except for the gentle ticking of the silver clock, each passing second carrying Rebecca Collins closer to a conversation she still believed she controlled and Marcus already knew had quietly ended. The gentle ticking of the silver clock suddenly seemed louder than every conversation in Harbor National Bank as Marcus Ellington reached into the inside pocket of his faded jacket and removed a matte black card with no decoration except his name engraved in understated silver letters. He placed it on the polished marble counter without sliding it forward, allowing the reflected light from the chandelier to settle across its surface like a spotlight. Rebecca Collins glanced at it with visible impatience and prepared another dismissive smile until Olivia quietly leaned closer and froze. Her eyes widened before she instinctively stepped back. "That card is issued only to executive oversight members," she whispered, almost afraid to hear her own voice. Rebecca shook her head. "Impossible." Marcus rested one hand beside the card and looked directly at Rebecca for the first time since entering the lobby. His expression remained calm, almost sympathetic, as though he understood exactly how the next few moments would unfold. "You asked for proof," he said evenly. "Now verify my name." Olivia entered the executive reference number she had memorized minutes earlier. The monitor instantly shifted to a secure authorization screen bordered in gold, followed by a message that covered the entire display. Executive client confirmed. Direct oversight status active. Regional leadership connected. Olivia slowly looked up at Marcus before turning the monitor toward Rebecca. The color drained from the manager's face as every confident assumption collapsed into silence. Jennifer Brooks stood motionless beside the counter while the elderly veteran removed his cap out of quiet respect. The college student who had been waiting for a checking account stared without blinking. Marcus allowed another second to pass before speaking again. "You questioned my request without verification. You redirected me without policy. You decided who belonged before you decided who I was." Rebecca opened her mouth, but no explanation arrived. Marcus gently picked up the black card and returned it to his pocket. "The interesting part is not that you misjudged me," he continued. "The interesting part is that you never believed a man wearing worn boots could have earned the right to stand where he stands." Olivia lowered her eyes, remembering every ignored instruction she had witnessed that morning. Jennifer quietly nodded as though every missing piece had finally fallen into place. Rebecca attempted one final smile, but it disappeared before it fully formed. "There must be some misunderstanding," she said softly. Marcus shook his head. "There is complete understanding." His phone vibrated once. He glanced at the screen and calmly locked it again. Regional leadership has already joined the review. The lobby became perfectly still. Customers who had arrived for ordinary banking no longer looked at Marcus as a stranger, but as someone whose quiet confidence had never depended on expensive clothing or public recognition. Rebecca looked toward the executive offices, then toward Olivia, then back at Marcus, realizing for the first time that every ignored request, every unequal greeting, every assumption built on appearance had unfolded in front of witnesses and inside systems that remembered everything. Marcus stood with the same relaxed posture he had carried through every insult and every delay. And in that silence, his greatest statement required no raised voice at all, because the room itself had already acknowledged the truth that prejudice had failed to see. No one in Harbor National Bank noticed the elevator doors opening until three executives in dark suits crossed the marble lobby with purposeful but unhurried steps, their polished shoes echoing softly across the floor where only minutes earlier Rebecca Collins had believed she controlled every conversation. At the front walked Regional Director Samuel Whitmore, carrying a slim tablet instead of a briefcase. He looked first at Marcus Ellington, nodded respectfully, and only then turned toward the premium banking counter. "The executive review is complete," he said in a calm voice that carried effortlessly through the silent room. Rebecca instinctively reached for her access badge, but before she could speak, the computer in front of her displayed a simple message in bright white letters. "Access suspended pending compliance review." Olivia's terminal remained active while Rebecca's screen slowly returned to the login page. Samuel touched the tablet once more. Service records, customer interactions, ignored verification procedures, and executive audit findings have all been preserved. Rebecca finally found her voice. "There has to be an explanation." Samuel answered without anger. "There will be an opportunity to provide one during the formal review." Jennifer Brooks quietly smiled, recognizing the difference between authority and volume. The elderly veteran rested both hands on his cane and looked toward Marcus with quiet admiration. The college student whispered. He never argued once. Marcus simply stood where he had always stood, hands relaxed, expression unchanged, as though the outcome had never been uncertain. Samuel turned toward Olivia. Your attempts to follow verification policy have been noted. Olivia looked surprised. I only tried to do my job. Samuel nodded. That is exactly the point. Around the lobby, customers exchanged thoughtful glances instead of hurried whispers. The mother helping her daughter make a deposit gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and said, Remember this day. Respect is something you give before you know who someone is. Rebecca looked around the room and realized the confident smiles she had offered selected clients all morning had disappeared, replaced by uncomfortable silence and the weight of choices that could no longer be undone. Marcus picked up the forgotten standard account brochure that had been handed to him earlier and carefully placed it back on the counter. Someone else may need this, he said quietly. Samuel almost smiled before addressing the staff once more. Effective immediately, customer experience training and compliance review will begin for this branch. Equal service is not a slogan. It is the foundation of trust. Olivia stepped from behind the teller station and finally extended her hand to Marcus. I am sorry for what happened here today. Marcus shook her hand warmly. You never stopped seeing the person in front of you. Do not lose that. Even the crystal chandeliers seemed brighter as conversations slowly returned to the lobby, but they carried a different tone now, one shaped not by appearance or assumptions, but by the unmistakable feeling that genuine accountability had quietly arrived without raised voices, public humiliation, or anger, leaving behind a lesson more powerful than any apology could ever become. Marcus Ellington looked around Harbor National Bank one last time and noticed that nothing in the building had physically changed. The marble floors still reflected the crystal lights. The polished counters still stretched across the lobby with perfect symmetry. The clocks still measured every passing second with quiet precision. Yet the room itself felt entirely different because assumptions had finally given way to understanding. Rebecca Collins stood silently beside her inactive terminal, no longer defined by authority but by reflection, while Olivia greeted the next customer with the same respectful smile she had wanted to offer everyone from the beginning. Jennifer Brooks collected her briefcase and paused before leaving. Today was not about money, she said softly. Marcus nodded. Money opens doors. Character decides what happens after they open. The elderly veteran smiled and adjusted his cap before extending his hand. Your father would be proud. Marcus accepted the handshake and looked toward the large windows where afternoon sunlight poured across the lobby. He taught me that dignity is the one investment nobody can take away. The college student waiting to open his first account quietly folded the application in his hands. He had arrived expecting to learn about interest rates and savings plans, but was leaving with a lesson that would remain far longer than any financial advice. The young girl beside her mother looked at Marcus and asked, Did you know everything would be all right? Marcus smiled gently. I knew the truth would eventually catch up with appearances. Samuel Whitmore closed his tablet and addressed the remaining staff. Every customer who walks through these doors brings a story you cannot see. Our responsibility begins before we know their title, their balance, or their influence. Olivia looked at Marcus one final time. What should I remember from today? Marcus glanced at his worn boots, then at the polished marble beneath them. Never measure potential by presentation. The strongest foundations are often hidden below the surface. The words settled across the lobby with more weight than any formal announcement. Customers resumed their conversations, but they now greeted one another with warmer expressions, and employees looked up instead of looking through the people standing in front of them. Marcus slipped the handwritten checklist back into his jacket pocket without adding another mark because every remaining question had already answered itself. He walked toward the revolving doors at the same steady pace with which he had entered, carrying no trophy, demanding no applause, leaving behind only quiet accountability and a standard that could not be ignored. As the doors turned and the city welcomed him back into the afternoon, the sunlight caught the worn edges of his jacket instead of a designer label, reminding everyone who had witnessed the moment that respect should never depend on clothing, wealth, or first impressions. It should begin the instant another human being walks through the door, because true leadership is not revealed by the power to be recognized, but by the wisdom to recognize the value in others before anyone else does. And Marcus never raised his voice that day because he chose something far stronger. He raised the standard.